Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take an image from, in this, my case, Midjourney, and bring it into Zoe Depth, what I talked about on Monday. We'll go through those motions, show how it can try to, it's a tool that tries to read depth using Gen AI, and then gives you a point cloud or a mesh. And then we'll bring that quickly into Rhino and start to use some of the sub-D and mesh tools on it. So what we'll do is at key times, I'll sort of take screen captures or save something or put something on a different layer. And so that's why, so you can sort of snapshot through the process and pull out, here's the image, here is the point cloud, here's the mesh, here's the point cloud, here's the mesh after cleanup, a quad remesh we'll do in sub-D, here's after I fill holes, right? And so if we can sort of keep that and either move them next to each other like in a snapshot sequence or keep them in the same exact place and put them on different layers, then it's really easy to sort of turn a layer on, turn a certain layer off, pull the image out, and then you have, again, more content to put in your documentation, I guess, of the process to put in your portfolio, your InDesign portfolio. So that's the plan for today. So this is today's posting, not much, but soon there will be a video posted under here of today's class. I'm just going to go back to modules and go to Mondays. Monday, we talked about 2D to 3D. And here's that huggingface.co link that takes you to Zoe Depth. All right, so what Zoe Depth does is it, again, takes a two-dimensional image, tries to read it three-dimensionally, starts to parse depth and edges and things like that, and then gives you a point cloud at the end. So Zoe Depth, let's see, I'm going to, you see these tabs. First of all, Hugging Face is like just an open source repository for different tools, putting them online, letting people test them and break them. And then usually there'll be links to either the research papers and or the GitHub model that you can download and install yourself if it's open source. So, but it's also just a nice sort of place where you can run these things remotely on a Google Notebook server. So you'll see that there's a couple of tabs here. One's called Depth Prediction. What I really want to focus in on is this middle one, Image to 3D. And then from here, you can see I just convert a single 2D image to 3D mesh. I can click on that and find an input image. I think I was giving it something, let's see, that was, all right, here we go. I was giving it something that had some angular geometry and some planar geometries really quickly. And then when I hit submit, within a second or two, it's going to give me a mesh. All right, there it is. You can see that it really is trying to sort of read the geometry in the data. It's single-sided. What that means is that when you look at it has a front and a back, and the front actually has the image information mapped onto each vertex, the color information. But when you turn it around, it disappears. It's still there. It's just you see through it. It's an old standard from surface modeling from many years ago. But it's basically, if I go over now I've set this corner before, and then I can go to this corner and just download a point cloud file. It's a .glb extension. Okay. And so I can take screen captures of this if I want. For your portfolio if you want them. But from here, right, I can take this GLB file and I can open it up into a CAD program like Rhino. For whatever reason, Parallels has not been, I haven't heard back from my IT guy yet, so I put Rhino 8 on my Mac side, like right before class. So I'm just gonna say new model. I don't care what the units are at this point. I'm not going to be that granular in detail for this. But what I can do is I can go to File, Import. Right? So I have a Rhino file open, and inside that file I'm going to import my point cloud. You can see, okay, here. If I just set it to all readable files, GLB is one type. Rhino is a really good import-export tool. It'll take just about anything and pop something back out to you in a different format if you need it. So I'm going to go ahead and pop that GLB in. You can see that it's starting to populate my screen. I'll go ahead and just zoom extend so I can see everything on each screen. You see that it's quite a dense mesh here. I'll just zoom in. Wow. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to do some cleanup. So you can see several things, right? First of all, the mesh it maybe isn't too optimal. Two, it only could see what it could see, right? It didn't fill in any of the gaps that are behind something else. So just like when you're using a laser scanner, there's a shadow behind objects. And those shadows become holes, right? You can see that there's a human, and there's a hole, behind me, and there's so on and on and on, right? So if it didn't see something, it couldn't sort of figure out what's back there, right? So, but it definitely saw walls and floors and a forced one-point perspective to a back wall and see part of a ceiling. If I turn on rendered mode, you can see that that it really did map the information to the vertices. But I'm going to toggle back and forth between rendered and wireframe, because one of the things we're going to do is then start to use this as a mesh that we can start to play around with and maybe even sort of give it an otherness sort of quality to it, right? So we're just sort of experimenting with these early tools. They're still in their infancy. They're limited, and so as a result, we're going to have some results that look fairly crude, right? And let's be honest, this looks fairly crude, right? So one of the things I mentioned before is I'm just going to go back to wireframe, and I'm going to just quickly make sure that my layers are set up the way I want. Right now, I'm going to say this is I'll just, hopefully can I just click on there? Okay, yeah. I'll just click on this layer name so I can change it. I'm going to say original mesh. And then I'm going to say quad remesh, because that's the next step we're going to do. Then we'll do simplified version. And then later on, we'll do one where we say filled holes or something like that, where we're trying to repair certain things and close it in. All right, so that's sort of my anticipated workflow. We'll see how well it works with this particular mesh. And of course, it's not Monday, but it sure feels like one, doesn't it? So I'm going to go ahead and select this. It's already in the, let's see. Look at its layer. I'm going to put it in the original mesh layer. Then I'm going to make a copy of it. Copy. In place. Sure, that sounds good. So now I should have two. When I try to select one, it says, which one are you trying to select? The first one or the second one? So I'm going to select the second one, and I'm going to put that on a different layer. I'm going to put that on the quad remesh layer. And that way I can go back to my layers and turn that original mesh off. It'll still be there on a different layer. And because they're color-coded, it'll be easy kind of to figure out which one's which. So at this point, I have a copy of this original mesh that I can start to play around with. And first thing I'm going to do is go to my sub-D tools. It's a tab along the top. Sub-Ds are great, but they're different than NURB surfaces. They're different than meshes. And I can do a quad remesh. That's where this tool is located, and what it's called. It's a sort of a square, blue shaded icon broken up into quads. And so it's going to ask me to select the objects, and I'm going to select this. It's going to come up with a box. So it's going to allow me to simplify the mesh, basically, and then to make every single face of the mesh a quad rather than a triangle. So I can also tell it the target quad count. So if I can crank that way down if I wanted to make it a very simplified mesh, or I could crank that way up if I wanted to make it more complex and have more vertices and faces, right? A mesh is usually a series of triangles or quads with when we zoomed in, you saw, right? What that looks like? Yeah.
Is there a preference, or what would be the use if there was a higher quad count versus a simplified? Like when would you use those, or when would they be most useful?
So what I would try to do is bring down the quad count. It's a lot easier to work with a mesh if you don't have billions of faces, but you have hundreds of faces. But you're also trying to find that sweet spot between not losing the fidelity of the information, right? So you're trying to find the sweet spot between optimal, let's see, how did you put it? You're trying to optimize, but trying to find that sort of perfect trade-off position between efficiency and having enough information still there, right? So I'll just hit 2000 and see what happens. I'll just leave it as the default and give it a second to work. Right, so you can see that simplified it quite a bit, and now it's a set of quads rather than a set of quads and triangles and all kinds of messes that might be in there. I like to do that just because it's sometimes easier to then again find edges and start to make something more manifold or simplify things the way I'd like. Right, so that's my original mesh. You can see in the red. You can see there's lots and lots of edges. I can zoom in and look at all those polygons. I can turn that off now, and I see the quad remesh version. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy of this. Copy, select it, and then in place, sure. And so now I have two of these. I'll select the second one, and I'm going to go back to my properties and turn its layer to simplified version. And I'll actually run the quad remesh with a smaller number and see what we actually get. Again, it might help us sort of fill things in later if we can get it down a bit. But I want to sort of show a progression of like really complex, less complex, less complex, less complex, and then I can sort of, again, if I populate a page with these sort of screen, or this sort of, this model undergoing these transformations, right? Then I can sort of pick, that's the one I want to move forward with, right? Let's see. So let me turn that one off. Let me do the quad remesh again, and let's see if I turn this in like a quarter of. Let's see what happens. Oh, let me undo something, and here's why. When I did the quad remesh and I changed this, I didn't say delete the original input item, so I'm going to do that. There we go. So that's it, even simpler, more simplified. You can see that we have some craps here, right? Like some stuff here that's less ideal. Lots of what we'd call naked edges for meshes, right? So usually a mesh, all the edges except for the ones with air behind them, they want to be sort of manifold and not have holes. We want the normals to be unified so that we know each one has a sort of consistent front and back. This is the stuff you kind of run into with 3D printing as well, right? Trying to make something manifold and watertight. All right, so by this time, I can't imagine we still have, we don't have any more render information, right? Because the original vertices, we lost all the color information because we decimated the number of vertices that there are in the mesh. So we just get this sort of white clay looking thing. So let's go back to wireframe. And again, step by step here, I can sort of, again, recount process. That's really important, right? Like you do diagrams, you show how you made your decisions and what you did operationally. This is no different. What you can see is that we have even some strays over here. It's all still considered one mesh, even though it's, here's a piece over here and here's a piece over there. They're not contiguous. The mesh is a mesh. So when it comes to the next step, filling holes and cleaning things up, it's different than if you were using SketchUp or Rhino out of the box, thinking about surfaces or solids. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make a copy, and I'll copy this one in place. In place, sure, why not? Select the second one I just made, and I'm going to put that in the right layer here called filled holes. I'm going to start to try to clean this thing up. All right, I'll turn off that other previous layer, make the filled holes layer the active layer. It's check marked. All right. So there's several ways we can go about this, but right now this is I believe it's still a mesh, yeah. And so if I go to the mesh pull down, right, you'll see that there's a special set of mesh tools. When we want to do things with meshes, we can fill holes, we can patch single faces, we can unify normals, align vertices, etc. Right? So one of the things I'm going to do, there's edit tools as well, welding and unwelding, trimming, splitting. You can do things to specific faces and edges. You can cull things that are called degenerate mesh faces, things that don't really work. Let's try that. Let's cull any degenerate mesh faces. Did it do anything? No degenerate faces were removed or modified. Okay, well that's good to know. So we're working with something that isn't there's no bad objects in here, which is good. But if there were, you could actually try to remove those automatically. Merge faces, merge coplanar faces, merge all coplanar faces. So let's merge all coplanar faces and let's see if there are any. I doubt there really are. Okay, 802 faces were merged into 57 ingons, yeah. So basically polygons. All right, good. And I'm just going through this, and I'm not going to do too much manually yet. I'm just going to go through the usual spiel. That's why I'm recording this. So when you go back through and you go, what the hell was Josh doing and where was that? Mesh pull down, edit tools and repair tools. You can check for self-intersections. You can rebuild the mesh normals if you need to. In other words, if some are facing out and some are facing in, you want them all to be either in or out together. That unify normals, let's see, split, swap, point, fill all holes. So let's try this. Now it's probably gonna come up with an error because there's not like an obvious sort of like hole. Maybe there is. Let's see. Fill mesh holes. Select the mesh. And, I can't see the command line. Okay, here we go. And it's just saying, okay, yeah. What it's saying is that there aren't any like sort of holes that are completely contained by the mesh, right? So for instance, you see this large hole, it comes all the way out and then there's no mesh. So it's not really a hole. It's just an edge. It did fill this one in though, didn't it? Which is different. So this was a part of a window that looked like it was sort of back behind in the shadow, so it was a hole, and it cleaned that up, or actually managed to clean that up. So there's a couple of things I'm going to do here, and one is where I have sort of stray geometry like this, I can either try to close it up, or I can just basically delete this and close this up, right? And it's not going to be an easy task, and so that's why I was saying, at this point, you just sort of want to record the process and show how far you got. So that way, it's not necessarily like you fixed the problem. It's kind of a weird problem, right? But you're doing this, going through the workflow, and then you're reflecting on it. So you can start to talk about, well, here I hit a dead end. I couldn't fix this. I couldn't fix that. Here's why, right? And that's part of just learning, right? So that's what we're really interested in. It's not, you don't come out of school knowing everything and all the answers. It's about how do you approach a problem, how do you reflect on it to understand where you did well and where you didn't, right? So, sorry, that's the best we could do in higher ed these days. So let me just turn this back to the wireframe, and I'm just going to continue to sort of simplify and clean. So if I select this, right, intuitively you would think if I selected this part, it'd be a separate piece from this, right? It's all one mesh, even though that's not contiguous. And so what we have to do is we have to find the right mesh tools to repair and to edit. So I'm going to go to Edit, and I'm going to say Delete Faces. And I'm going to make it so that I can select just these faces and hit Enter, and those will be deleted away. I can do the same thing over here for these little faces. I saw this little straggler. Oops. Delete faces. I'll pick that one, and I'll pick that one. Maybe I'll drag in a box around it. Maybe I'll get rid of that little jaggy thing and delete those, right? So what I'm trying to do is just sort of clean this up into a more of a manageable, doesn't look so goofy. And look at some of these edge conditions in particular. If I drag from left to right, just like AutoCAD, it selects everything inside, totally inside my selection box. If I drag from right to left, anything that hits or touches that selection box. So again, just a quick CAD refresher there. And I'm just going to go around this thing and go around the edges and see if there's anything else I can do just to make this look a little more. What's that little guy right there? Oops. Repeat that last command and select those and delete them away. All right. And you could do this for a while if you really wanted to and had the the patience, which I don't necessarily have right now. But I'm just going to go around and do some of the low-hanging fruit. It looks like there's a couple stragglers there. Repeat the last command and zoom in and get this little dude. Get these little dudes there. Nope. Come on. Oh, sorry. Let me just go back to select that tool. That was mesh, edit tools. I'm editing the mesh, and I'm deleting specific faces away. Here we go. Now I can start to select, hit enter when I'm done. Hit enter to repeat the last command, and I'm on my way. There's another little stray. I'm just going to go and sort of audit this thing a little bit, right? Now you can see quite clearly the limitations of these tools, right? I think we looked at that concrete in the original image. It'd be like those are planar, or at least close to planar, at least for our practical purposes, planar geometries. Whereas this gives us not quite planar stuff, right? And so it's doing its best, but have some empathy for the machine. It's trying its best. It's never actually experienced a living room. It's never been in one before. Like, what if C-3PO and R2-D2 just came out of the factory and hadn't had life experiences yet? All right, so I'm just going to go around again, just quickly sort of cleaning these things up. Yeah, I can't help it. I got to fix some of these things that if I see them now. Let's get rid of some of this little folded nonsense here. There we go. And it's kind of hard sometimes to judge what's actually happening three-dimensionally when you're looking at a wireframe and you have self-intersections, right? One of the things I might actually do now is look at that and see if I go to mesh, edit tools, repair tools, mesh self-intersect. Let's see if it's self-intersecting. It'll tell us, and it'll highlight the edges where the mesh is intersecting itself. Yeah. So that would be a problem if we were 3D printing this, right? All right, so once I've sort of cleaned some things up, I've simplified this, cleaned some things up. Now what I'm going to do, last thing, is since it's not an object in the round, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to offset this and try to make some sort of solid out of it, just for fun. So if I wanted to 3D print it in some way, I could make it into a thin shell, try to 3D print it. Let's see. So I'm going to say offset shell with thickness or something like that. And once more, I'm going to copy this, put it in place, copy it in place. Select the second one I just made, put it on this new layer, offset shell. Oh yeah, look at that. Go back to my layers, turn that previous one off. So now, I think it's worth repeating, right? Like I can go through, I can pick out the perfect snapshot later on. Maybe I change the colors of the layers so I don't have red and these colors are terrible, right? Like, but what I can do is I can, pull out the image here, right? Change the background to white, get rid of that grid, change the line work to black and gray and stuff like that. And I'll show you how to do that in a minute. And then turn that off, turn that one on. Same exact placement, same exact orientation, same exact size. Get this one out. And then turn that one off, turn this one on, right? So then I have a set of images I can line up and talk about the process step by step, label them, etc. So let's put that offset shell in and let's try to offset a mesh. There are some mesh tools here in this. Let's see if there's an offset here. It's probably up here as well. Let's see, edit tools, is there offset? Merge, Boolean, difference, intersection, split. Match, mesh edge, unify, swap, rebuild. So if I don't find them in the mesh, then what I'll do is I'll look in the sub-D. I know that for sure that there's a offset sub-D into a solid. Extrude mesh, quad remesh, reduce mesh polygon count. Let me try typing in the command. Mesh offset mesh. There we go. Okay. Select the mesh. There it is. What a mesh. All right, hit enter when done. And then we can give it an offset distance as well as the direction. Do we want to offset it the inside or the outside? And do we want it to try to be a solid? Ooh, that's a weird dynamic preview that we have. And just give it a little bit of a shell. So I'm just going to go to the outside and give it just a little smidgen of a shell and click. And there we go. Now we have something that, now we're gonna have some self-intersection, so it wouldn't be watertight. Some slicers are pretty forgiving about that if you're wanting to 3D print this. They'll just sort of error it out or just forget about it if you see little hangers and things like that off of it. But there we go. Now we actually have a few edges, surfaces, and faces, right? So going from 2D to 3D, kind of a weird workflow, right? It's not something they usually do these days, because when we use digital technologies, we're usually making a virtual three-dimensional construct and then extracting two-dimensional drawings from it, right? But back in the day, right, we would always have to design in 2 dimensions and think about what that third dimension would look like, right? Section and plan. And we would have to draw these things manually. So it's kind of a strange, weird sort of way of doing this. So what I'm going to do now is quickly talk about how to then take some of this imagery out of Rhino in a nice way, okay? What I'm going to do is I'm going to assume that I'm going to take for each step, first of all, I'm going to find just the perfect orientation and size, and so that way I can just sort of turn things on or off and get things out. But I'm going to change the background. I'm going to also, so I'm going to try to get both the wireframe and the rendered version for each snapshot. That way I have things together and I can mix and match as needed. All right. So first and foremost, let's turn on that original mesh. And I'm going to turn it to wireframe. Oops, there we go, wireframe. And what you'll see is that, again, all the edges of the wireframe geometry, by default, they're the color of the layer, right? Just like if you're drawing in AutoCAD. That's Rhino works basically the same way. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come up here and change the layer color. I'm going to change all of these to black. I don't need to color code them anymore. And what you'll find is that they update each time. Even my offset, I'm turn that, okay, there we go. Doesn't change the material when you render, just changes that wireframe, all the lines, the colors. And then there's a couple of other things I'm going to do here. So one thing I'm going to try to do is change the properties here for viewing. So I'm going to try to, like, let's say, change the background, make it white, turn off that grid, etc. Right? I want these to look like I'm so anal retentive when it comes to graphics, anyway, right? So, but I think we all are, right? We're all as architects, we want something that looks good. So I'm just going to, let's see. This is where I have to really think about this for a moment. Tools, options. This is the same for Windows, the Windows version. Tools, options. Now this is going to look different. On the Windows side, you'll have a menu over here on the left-hand side. But I'm going to go to display modes. And I'm going to look at something called, is it artistic? No, technical. Oh yeah, look at that. Technical, so good. All right, so I'm going to go with that, and I'm going to change a few things. The background, I'm going to say solid color. Let's turn it to white. And let's see, ground plane op settings, I'm going to say off. I'm going to turn the ground plane off. I'm just going to have this float in air, in space. Shade objects, I'm going to say shade objects, yes. Objects, single color for all objects, rendering material. I'm going to say use front face settings for any back face. That way we don't see through the background anymore. I'm going to say show curves, show hidden lines, show edges, so silhouettes. That looks good. I like that. Then I'm going to go to grid. Okay. I'm going to go to objects. And here I'm going to look at lines. I'm going to say hidden line. I'm going to say, yeah, that's fine. We changed all the layer colors to black, but we can start to change their line weights as they are displayed. So silhouette, maybe I up that line weight to 3. And let's see, for clipping, that's for lines, curves, blah, 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 blah. Shadows, I'm going to turn shadows on. Let's try that, why not? Hit OK. Let's try that. That's for technical mode. So now I come over here where I have wireframe shaded rendered. I can go to technical. I've changed the options. And you can see that it's actually shading things. Interesting. So I'm going to go back to those options, tools, pull down options, and start to change that display mode once more. Go back to, where is it? Technical? There we go. I'm going to turn shadows off. I'm going to go to general. I'm going to go ahead and turn shade objects off. So I'm going to say, how do I turn that off? Let's see. Where is it? Ground plane off. Let's see, where is it? Flat shading. I want to turn shading off. Where did it go? Let's say use advanced GPU lighting. Sure, why not? But I'm going to turn off. Why won't it let me turn off shade objects this time? Oof. All right, well, anyway, let me just double check this. Show grid, objects. Maybe it's because I have this stuff on and off. Other, real-time engine. Right, but anyway, I can go ahead and start to change. Oof, let's see, technical mode. I don't want this to render. How do I turn that off? Use front face settings, standard shading, parallel lines, show seams, show curves. And I just want to turn that off, but apparently it's not going to let me. But what you can see is that as I turn these things on or off, I can start to get different things here. So really quickly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to options. And if you have difficulties with this over the weekend, like this part, play around with the mesh, play around with going through those motions of that mesh cleanup, saving snapshots along the way, right, on different layers. I can always help out on Monday with this when we come back to get, if you come back and say, I couldn't get the background to change and things like that. I can help with that. But I am recording this, so you can always look back at this later. Let's see, general. Okay, so let's go technical. What I'm going to do is instead of using the technical, I'm going to hit a plus and make a copy of the technical. I'm going to use that instead. And I'm going to turn off shade objects there. There we go. Oh, yeah. All right. Now that I did that, you'll see my technical copy is here. All right. Now let me go back to those, and there's a way to turn on like the mesh. I want to see all the mesh edges and things like that. So let me just double check this. Let's see, technical copy, view, show seams, edges, lines, no shading objects, no ground plane, it's turned off, solid color white, grid, objects, locked objects, points, curves, lines, use the object color, use section styles, color usage. Well, when in doubt, and that doesn't work, what I can do is go back to wireframe. I can change a few more things. So another way of doing this is just to say, I like the wireframe like this. I just need to get this grid off and then turn the background to white, right? So here's another way of doing it. Let's see. If I go to, is it viewport properties or display options? Display options. Wireframe. Oh, I guess I can just turn it here. I can viewport background, I can say solid color and white, right? Show grid, I'm going to turn that off, turn those things off from my screen. All right, so what I can do is I can tweak some settings and get this exactly the way I want. And then from there, if I want to take out images, I can turn on a layer. I can say this is on wireframe, and I can say view, capture to file, and I can tell it I want the viewport, so in this case it's saying, okay, it's the perspective view. I can have it give it a transparent background, or I can just leave that white background. I can also give it a scale and resolution. So right now the scale is set to 1, and it's telling me my viewport is 1252 by 768. If I wanted to have a higher resolution value, I could scale that up, let's say by 2, and now the effective resolution would be 2504 by 1536, right? But I can hit apply, and then I can basically, I don't know why it never gives me, this is the Mac side of things, I can put it, let's say, yeah, sure, I'll put it in my downloads. I'll put a new folder in here called mesh screenshots. And I'm going to say this is the original mesh, so O1 and wireframe. All right, now I can also come here and say rendered and pull that one out. Capture to file, same settings, apply, and put it in the same place, but instead of saying O1 wireframe, it's going to be O1 rendered. All right, I'm going to turn that back to wireframe because I'm just going to turn that one off, turn this one on, and do the exact same thing, right? Haven't moved my screen at all. It's going to be the exact same size, exact same orientation, in the exact same place, to file. Yep, same settings, apply. And this time I'm going to say O2 wireframe. Right, this is the second part of the process. Hit OK. And then maybe I will turn it to rendered and take that out as well. Right, so then I can make a decision later on, which one I want. You can see, here's an issue we're going to run into, is that this does actually have by default the ground plane turned on. You can see we're casting a shadow. You can see the shadow goes off the edge. So we'll have that like gray, and then suddenly you'll see the edge. So if you put that at the bottom edge of the paper, no problem, right? It just looks like it's still floating. But if you have a margin and then cut that off, it's going to be like, oh, damn it, I hate that, right? So I'll worry about that later, but I can talk about that on Monday. But essentially, well, actually, maybe I can do it here. If you come across that, what I can do is I can right-click over here. You see where I have properties and layers. I've been flipping back and forth the whole time just to toggle what control box I have. If I right-click over here, I can also toggle on more icons. And I'll just toggle on the rendering icon. And that gives me the render settings. And here's where I can turn off the ground plane once and for all. There we go. So in the render settings, it's a little rendered sphere with a little specular reflection on it. You can go to the ground plane, turn it off, and now it looks nice and clear. Still haven't moved anything here, so I can just take this out, and it's the exact same orientation as everything else. Capture to file, and there we go. Keep the same settings. O2 instead of wireframe, I'm going to say rendered, and on and on. Right? I'm going to go ahead and save this Rhino file since I haven't been doing that. Mesh test, just to quickly. So now I can go back to my layers, turn off the quad remesh version, a simplified version. I'm going to go to the wireframe. You can see that's really simplified. And again, just bring this out. Capture to file. And so apply, and not O2 wireframe, but O3 wireframe. There we are. I'm going to do the same thing with these. After a while, the renders look largely the same. But I want to sort of track what I'm doing to the wireframe each time. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. Capture to file. But I did want to get at least the renderer of when it had the map, the information still of the image mapped onto it, just for good time's sake. 04 wireframe, and now an offset shell. Look at that with some thickness, with authority. Look at that. All right. Capture to file. Same settings, etc. So I've kind of gone through all the motions with you, and then from here we have a series of PNG files I can then start to place in the portfolio and start to talk. Add the, and talk a little bit. You can always add you want to add a, what do you call it, caption. Sorry, I can't think of simple words today. Caption underneath each one, but sort of say, what was, here's the original output from Zoe depth, right? Mesh with color values mapped onto it. Then here I did quad remesh. Then I reduced the quad count of the quad remesh. Then I started to repair some things. Then I offset it into something thick, right, and a solid. So anyway, that's the thing. So like I said, it's crude, right? And what I would say is, if you go back to the original step at the very beginning and think about, is this something, am I looking at space, like an interior volume that's being wrapped around me? Or is this an object in the round, right? You can experiment and see which one works better. And then use the one you want, or compare the two if you'd like, right? again, I think the key is not that like you're gonna look at this and everybody's gonna go, oh my gosh, that's so awesome, I need that 3D printed for me, right? The key thing is like, what was the workflow? What did you discover? What did you learn, right? And as you can compare, then like a year from now, or 2 years from now, you can compare where the technologies really are, right? Because these things change quite quickly.
Is there already an improved version of ZoeDep that you've seen?
What's that?
Is there already an improved version of ZoeDep that you've seen? That you've tried?
That's on Hugging Face, no, but I mean, like you can go to their paper. These are, let's see, Sharik. Where's Sharik from? One of these was like NYU, Toyota, and Columbia University or something. Yeah, so this is like a research group putting these out there, and then they're making it open source and putting it out there. But you can always read their paper to see how it works if you want. But it's a lot of like linear algebra and other kinds of things that escape my my media understanding. You know, vector math. You know, if this gives you a headache, don't worry. It gives me a headache as well. But what I'd like for you guys to do is try that process. Try to bring the images out. We can always take a look and refine some things if we need to on Monday. And we'll also discuss the reading on Monday. This is from Antoine Picon. What about humans, artificial intelligence, and architecture? This was back in 2019 or 2020. So it was back before all the AI stuff really blew up everybody's understanding of what machines can do. But I think it's still nonetheless really interesting, some of the questions and statements that he puts out. And so, you know, just as an example, right? You know, he talks about some people are advocating the fundamental otherness of computers in order to take care of and take advantage of their creative potential, but also trying to ask, well, what's really human then? And you know, if machines can do more and more and more, right? Like, where's that dividing line, that differentiating line? So go ahead and read that. It's I think interesting because what it does is it gives you examples, right? So he talks about popular culture examples, even back to that film Metropolis, right? Talking about automation, but also artworks and things like that that you can always look up and sort of there's a photo of one of like this little robot having a conversation with a Buddhist monk, right? So like you can start to dive into these other sort of creative examples that sort of question the role of technology in humans, machines and humans, how we interact, and what do we automate, and what can humans do, what do machines do. So do you read it and you look at it and go, oh, that's kind of a boring read. Look at the examples that he poses, look through those and see what those were about if you thought the reading was boring. But otherwise, pull out some things that you think might help you sort of formulate a discussion or a question or something else. Okay. All right. And we'll end it early today. What the hell? Oh, there's I actually, no, that would have been, we're at the end of the semester and I only just now learned that you can actually raise this up and lower it.
Cool.
Boy, this is like no end to happiness right here.
Yeah.
All right.
That's good.
Okie doke. And like I said, it's weird, right? Like,